Hi, I'm Sarah Cowgill, along with Andrew Moran, Dave Patterson, Graham Noble, and John Clark. And this is the Conservative Five, an online TV news production of Liberty Nation News. America was introduced to the latest shiny object of the Democratic Party, Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. Tagged as Kamala Harris's running mate, Walz brings the most radical left-wing policies ever to be this close to ascending to the two highest offices in the land. Harris might have some splaining to do. It does boggle the mind that in just 8 years, Democrats who rolled Bernie Sanders out of town, afraid he was too commie-leaning, picked this guy. What an about face. I don't know about you people, but I am beginning to miss Bernie. He was almost normal. It's a huge U-turn, John Clark. What happened?
Well, you pick on me because I'm in Vermont. Everybody thinks nobody lives in Vermont but Bernie Sanders.
Are you wearing your mittens?
Yeah, well, there's a funny story behind that, but I'll spare our listeners. I think it's very interesting how you set this up, but I think it really reveals a lot about this party. Bernie Sanders was not removed because of his far left communism. He was removed because he was not the anointed one. He was removed because Hillary was the chosen elect in the new hierarchy, which is really about power, not policy. And so, this is a switch. And interestingly, a lot of voters were so upset about that they became Trump supporters. So too did a lot of Obama supporters when they felt disenfranchised by their party. Now, a more interesting comparison might be between Walz and RFK Jr. He's the new Bernie. He wasn't as far left as Bernie or Walz, and they have canceled him, essentially. And today he has a newsletter out calling the Democrats the greatest threat to democracy because he got 140,000 signatures to get on the ballot in New York. They don't want him there any more than they want Bernie. So I think what's really happening is this is a gift to Americans because instead of trying to balance the ticket, as RFK himself did by picking, a left-leaning vice presidential running mate, she's picked another far lefty. And it's interesting because, for one thing, she has no policies of her own. So she's starting from zero, trying to create some kind of substance to someone who really hasn't had any. But where is RFK in all this? And how many people are feeling disenchanted by the Democratic Party watching this? And look at the exhibit to the American people. We have Walz showing us the far left extremism that has really dominated this party while Joe Biden pretended to be a uniter to bring Americans together in tolerance. It's good. This gives the insight into what Kamala Harris means when she says, and I quote, "What can be unburdened by what has been." That's actually a mantra for the new utopia. What she's really keying into her listening cult audience is we can have, you can raid stores and shoplift and have crime and not be burdened by the rule of law that has been. We can open the borders and not be burdened by the rule of law that has been. We can spend all the money we want with infinite income for everyone, destroy the currency, and not be bound by the economics and the math that has been. This actually shows us what she really means when she says that, in my view. And I think it's going to send a lot of people properly running for the hills.
Well, that's one way of putting
Not
it.
Vermont. Not Vermont.
That's the scariest thing we've heard since Dave was talking about Ukraine not too long ago. What I want to know if Trump was the catalyst to this in 2016. They went crazy and saw an opening. The very progressive left saw this opening to make him the boogeyman and create, if you want the boogeyman or if you want peace, love, and harmony. But that's just kind of smoke and mirrors, Graham. I mean, did Trump do this to us in a not meaningful way? I mean, I'm sure he didn't plan on it, but I think he might have caused this.
I don't think that. Personally, I believe that Obama was the true catalyst of this. I believe that everything that is going on now, they began planning this when they gave Barack Obama the nomination when he ran back in 2008. And I think kind of it was the other way around with with Trump is Trump was created by this movement of the progressive left to push us all towards this insane kind of lawless utopia where, you know, economics and mathematics don't actually matter anymore because we can all just do what we want, you know, as long as we're loyal to the almighty state. And I think that movement began and was, they were laying the groundwork of it under Obama. I think perhaps some of these more lunatic fringe progressives are probably disappointed that Obama never went as far as they wanted to go. But I think that's when it started. And I think Trump was created by that. He basically became the, you know, he was the pendulum swinging the other way, if you want. But then, of course, you know, after 4 years of Trump, didn't even take 4 years of Trump. It took just the few months of Trump campaigning for president for them to decide, wow, we can actually now make this guy the scapegoat. You know, we can say that what we're doing is a reaction to this guy who is going to be who's going to be an extreme right-wing dictator and is going to destroy the world. So I think they used Trump as the excuse almost, but they were going this way before Trump even came on the scene, I think.
Well, good point. In Walz's case, he's a Democratic governor of a swing state. But if we look at all the governors across the land, the Democratic governors, are they all hardcore left, or are there any moderate Dem party people left? I mean, it seems to me that progressives are just a faction. They're a loud faction. But Andrew, help me out here.
Well, you know, a lot of them are hard leftists, and if they're all hard leftists, they get infected with a woke mind virus, to quote, you know, the great Elon Musk. So it's challenging to find any Democrat who is you know, right of Tim Walz. And let's look at a list of some mainstream governors that you know many people would know. Washington State Governor Jay Inslee. He signed a law giving refuge for transgender minors to protect them from their parents. In New York, you have Governor Kathy Hochul, who is fast-tracking illegal immigrants for government jobs, essentially creating new state positions to give them some semblance of employment. In Illinois, Governor J.B. Pritzker, he's running that state into the ground. He calls it the most progressive state, but it's a bankrupt state with a lot of crime. In California, everyone knows Gavin Newsom's record. When Kamala Harris, when she was picking her running mate, people said, "Oh, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro." Once again, he is a progressive. He was a progressive, or excuse me, is a progressive governor, and they picked him just because of his support for Israel. But what made Josh Shapiro funny is because he tergiversated on Israel for absolutely nothing at all because he didn't get the position. So it's hard to find any moderate Democrats sitting in power who could appeal to perhaps, you know, the traditional value Americans. And it's hard to maintain the whole blue dog Democrat appeal when the extremes dominate the organization, they dominate the Democratic National Committee, and they want to give illegals driver's licenses. They want to abandon parental rights. They just want to, you know, spend money, give you know, multinational corporations all this money, and they have no clue what they're doing on foreign policy. And for that, on foreign policy, I will defer to Dave Patterson on that issue.
Dave, you can go ahead and answer that question for Andrew. But then I kind of want to pivot back to if we watched this party change in real time from kind of normal center left to center to crazy. But go ahead, Dave, answer Andrew's question.
I think that I fall on the side of Graham here, because what we've seen, starting from the Obama administration and then through the Biden-Harris failures, you know, with the one exception of the oasis of sanity between the two, it's a continuum from liberal policies to progressive policies to radical progressive leftist policies. What we've seen has been the growing of the socialist agenda. First, you know, these radicals start to tear down the institutions that Americans have depended on for national security, local neighborhood safety. You know, despite the Biden administration's claims that the military being the best, the military is devolving. We can't build ships or intercontinental ballistic missiles or aircraft on cost, on time, and that perform. Recruitment has failed to meet its goals for the last 3.5 years. And the operational leadership, well, we've seen that in action. With very few exceptions, it's feckless, afraid. It's afraid of a military like Iran causing havoc in the Middle East. It will not respond appropriately to Iran. There is no one in the current administration that will be willing to stop them. We don't have the Pentagon of Reagan or Bush or Trump, even for that matter. The march from democracy, Sarah, and freedom to an anemic socialist nanny state that won't defend its people, it's been relentless and unfortunately successful, and that should be frightening.
I implore our viewers to look at the Democratic National Convention's 1992 campaign promises. It's completely night and day over the last 30 years. At that time in 1992, they're promising what? Securing the border, lowering taxes, reining in federal spending, tackling the national debt. And then you fast forward to the president, it's completely different. It's night and day. That when I saw that a few days ago, it just wow. It's just what the heck happened to the Democratic Party in just a couple of decades.
Well, and just according to Graham, since Obama was in 2008. So, I mean, were we all sleeping? Did we not see this change? We've been watching the Republican Party go from being the party of billionaires and millionaires to the working man. And so while we were watching that, were we distracted and not watching what happened with the Democrats?
Sarah, to pick up on Andrew's point, not to go too far back, but in 1968, when you had the riots in Chicago at the Democratic Convention, and you had this really sort of resurgence of Republican conservative points of view, and you had Nixon, who eventually was elected, and I think the Republicans at that point went, I'm glad that's over, and we've got Nixon in there. But what happened as a consequence of that was that all of those crazies and liberals and radicals that we faced on the streets of Chicago, they became the professors in our universities. And the results of that are what we're seeing today.
Yeah, you go back. I was going to make the exact same point. You saw this happening 10 years ago on the college campuses. These kids who were so apoplectic because somebody wore a costume at a Halloween party in Yale University, 2015. So you're seeing the consequences of how these professors indoctrinate these kids, and then these kids are going to be leading the companies. They're going to be working in government. They're going to be running for office. It's terrifying of what's happening. But when you saw this happening 15 years ago. Anyone could have seen what would happen 15 years ago and what's occurring today.
And I don't think
I mean, all the country's major institutions are dominated by this progressive people with this progressive ideology. I mean, big tech. I always find it funny that the Democrats still like to say that they're opposed to, corporate America and the greedy corporations and that. But many of those corporations today are run by progressives. And then, of course, they dominate the media and they dominate the entertainment industry. Mm-hmm. And worst of all, they dominate the academic institutions. And so that's why, the rest of America may not have been asleep, but the rest of America has really had no way to fight back against all these huge national institutions that have been taken over by progressives and are forcing this stuff down our throats. And unfortunately, the only thing that stands between us and their megalomaniacal kind of schemes is a Republican Party that has the backbone of a dead jellyfish. We got a handful of Republicans who are willing to actually speak out against these people, and the rest of them are just hopeless. And so, and then guess what else is standing between them and us? Oh, Donald Trump. And that's why they all hate him as much as they do and are willing to go to any length to destroy the man.
Here's one name. Does anyone remember this name? James Damore. Does anyone remember this guy? 10 years ago, He wrote a memo at Google saying essentially how men and women are different. And what happened? He got fired from Google because of that memo. And that dominated a lot of headlines for a long time. And that was a glimpse into the future. And that was, I think, about 10 years ago. So when I talk about progressivism running these major corporations and massive institutions, Graham is absolutely correct.
I agree with everyone. And I just think, though, that the Republican Party, in trying to develop its own identity, really, it's not his job to develop the Democrats' identity. And I think that's been the schism we've looked at with Bernie and with RFK, et cetera. That party is in chaos, and it's having a very hard time defining what it is in the midst of its schizophrenic episode. And that's what I think we see.
Gosh, maybe we'll see old RFK slide right in there and we'll stick another Kennedy in the White House. That'd be interesting. Well, guys, I think the Bernie bros are probably having the last laugh after being excommunicated 8 years ago. Their freak flag is flying high in the Democratic Party. So I guess we watch and wait for the dance with Walz to begin or end. Thanks for tuning in. That's it for our Conservative 5 panel today. Check out our other C5 shows and segments on your favorite video platform. YouTube, Vimeo, Rumble, we're on them all. As well, Liberty Nation News has its own Roku channel where you can see all of our TV productions. I'm your host, Sarah Cowgill. Thanks for joining us today for Free Thinking, Free Speech, LibertyNation.com.